This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us. We've got a banging show for you guys today as Hayden Howerton and I will break down SMU Penn State first round of the college football playoff game. Wow, crazy to think about. But before we do that, got to remind you guys to head over to ontheponyexpress.com. Just $1 for your first week to join us. Then nice little discount on your annual subscriptions, cheaper than monthly. Trust me, it's the way to go because we are breaking down all the transfer portal scoop. Just dropped another note on the transfer portal and who SMU is targeting at a key position just before jumping on the podcast. So check that out. The message board is cruising with the college football playoff as well. So we appreciate all of you guys who have jumped on board and moved us even closer now to 1,100 subscribers, which is crazy. So thank you guys for jumping on board with us. It's been a blast. Before we get to Hayden Howerton, I want to let you guys know that we are presented by our friends at the Thomas Auto Group. SMU owned. Check them out. Head up 75 in McKinney. They've got Ford. They've got Subaru. They've got Volkswagen. And mention on theponyexpress.com for employee pricing on pre-owned and new vehicles. And before we get to Hayden Howerton, want to leave you with a word from our friends at Brandon Thomas Volkswagen.
Welcome to Brandon Thomas Volkswagen, where we're proud to be the #1 Volkswagen dealer in the Dallas Metro, thanks to you. So we're giving you 0 down, 0 due at signing, 0 security deposit, and 0 first payment with every 2024 Tiguan 2.0 TS lease. Or get 0% APR for 60 months when you finance, all during the sign and drive event.
Visit us today at Brandon Thomas VW in McKinney, located at the corner of Highway 75 and 121.
Home of the Thomas Promise.
All right, now happy to be joined by Hayden Howerton. It's game week. It was nice having the bye week, but feels more normal to be back with you breaking down this game, Hayden. And for SMU, they're hoping that it's just a step in the right direction for a national championship.
I know, Billy, I hope you had a nice week off. I know that I did. Got out, hit some golf balls on Saturday. Missed SMU football, though, so I'm glad we're back talking it. But college football playoff, man, first round. It's the first year of the 12-team playoff, and we pull a giant in Penn State, noon Eastern, Beaver Stadium in University Park, Pennsylvania on TNT. And my initial feelings are, can SMU go out and be a powerhouse in college football? 2024 Penn State is one of the most well-rounded teams in the playoff, in my opinion. Sorry, OJ Pony. I just truly believe that. They've got the talent. They've got the coaching. I mean, maybe a Ohio State, maybe a Texas team would surpass them, but Penn State just doesn't have the national titles recently, but they have been a Big Ten power football program since really I can remember. Penn State consistently competes for the top recruits in the country. And then at the end of the day, Beaver Stadium is going to be electric. 106,572 strong. You know the place is going to be packed out. Might set a record. They already set one earlier this year against Ohio State. This is the second largest stadium in the country, only trailing the Big House at Michigan. This is the 6th loudest stadium in the country by decibels at 122, which is similar to a chainsaw. And look, I've played at the Big House before, and I don't really think it's that loud because of how far the fans are from the field. Beaver Stadium's been renovated. The fans are a little more on top of you than it is at some of these other giant stadiums. And then you have to play the weather into effect. I mean, when I checked the other day, it was 15 and 27. And from what I hear, it's continuing to go down. It's going to be overcast, so it's not going to be a ton of sun. This is the ultimate road test for this SMU Mustangs team. There is not going to be a harder environment to play in college football, playoffs or not, that you can find in the country. So, but SMU is not as green as they once were. They went and played Clemson in a anything but neutral ACC championship game in Charlotte just 2 weeks before this game. But look, it's going to take the ultimate preparation and precision to go out and win this ball game.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. It is going to take a lot of focus and a lot of energy that they'll have to create on their own. This is the first, since Oklahoma, but really, is it anything like Oklahoma probably not. Maybe some of the striping and things that the fans do, you could maybe prepare for a little bit, but that whiteout is going to be something else. And got a few pictures from our Penn State site today. Snow on the ground in Beaver Stadium. So expecting it to be chilly, but look, SMU has no pressure on itself to go out and do anything in this game, quite frankly. They went out there against Clemson. They did not start well, and they, paid for it ultimately, but this is an SMU team that showed it's talented enough to play with just about anybody in the country. And if they can just start out, strong, that's going to force Penn State to chase them. And it's going to force maybe a little bit of tense moments for that Penn State team. This is a team that is under pressure to win the big game, something they haven't really done well under James Franklin. So, I think the home crowd for Penn State is going to play a big factor. It's going to be on SMU to go out with maybe a mindset like they had at Louisville earlier this season as well, and combat that with just good old-fashioned high-flying offense and hard-nosed defense.
You said it. Penn State has a really tough time winning the big game. They're only 3-17 under James Franklin against top 10 teams, and they're only 13-27 against ranked teams. And so I look at this game where SMU really, the pressure is off. It's all on Penn State. It's all about a home team in the college football playoff should be able to perform. But SMU, when they're able to play free and they're able to go out swinging and start fast, could be a really fun game for SMU. But before we get too much into the on the field, I do want to talk about the history of the Penn State Nittany Lions. Obviously, an extremely prestigious university. Top 30 public school in the country, an undergrad population of more than 42,000. It's described by multiple sites and writers as the best alumni base in the country. They are extremely passionate about Nittany Lions football and Penn State in general. All of the people that I know that went to Penn State are absolutely diehard. But as far as football goes, they started football in 1887. This is the 137th year of Penn State football. They were an independent program for a really long time until 1992 when they joined the Big Ten. And they have 4 Big Ten titles since then. They also have 2 national championships, one of which they split with SMU, that of course being the 1982 season. And then in 1986, Penn State also claimed one. But you can't talk about Penn State if you don't talk about legendary head coach Joe Paterno. He was an assistant coach from 1950 to 1966, and then he became the head coach in 1966, and he was the head coach the entire time until 2011, which is the record for a head coach of a single program, 46 years, and then 61 in total. Led them to 409 wins and all of the championships I just talked about. But on a little bit of a darker tone, you can't talk about Penn State if you don't talk about the infamous Jerry Sandusky case. And I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but all you have to know is that longtime defensive coordinator Jerry Sandusky abused kids over decades. It led to Joe Paterno's firing and his subsequent death only 70 some odd days later after being dismissed of head coach of Penn State. And so Jerry Sandusky's in prison for the rest of his life. Joe Paterno's statue on campus was torn down. And even when the NCAA reinstated Joe Paterno's wins, the statue has not returned to campus. Penn State could have and probably should have become the second program to receive the death penalty. And it's still really a dark cloud over the program even 13 years later. But let's talk about Beaver Stadium. Opened in 1960. It's expanded 6 times and it's doubled in size since its opening. This is a natural grass surface, which, as you guys know, I love, but they are going to switch over to field turf next year. Expecting over 110K. They hit that 110K mark against Ohio State earlier this year in a college game day game. But like I talked about, the Big House is very spread out compared to Beaver Stadium. There's multiple decks and levels to Beaver Stadium, and it's going to make it feel like the fans are right on top of you. This has been described as the toughest road atmosphere in the world, and a whiteout takes it to a whole new level. So it's going to be fun, but it's going to be extremely challenging. You probably are going to have to go off of some kind of silent cadence just because when you can't hear the quarterback in the shotgun, there's not a chance that you're going to be able to time it up from an offensive lineman getting off the ball at the same time. You're going to have to go off of either head nods or tilts or whatever you see the NFL guys do the same way. But head coach James Franklin, he's been the head coach since 2014. He's 95-39 at Penn State, and he consistently leads Penn State to 10-win seasons. But like we said earlier, he can't really seem to win when it does matter, unfortunately. And so that's the history of Penn State, and pretty soon we'll get to the on the field. But it's a very historic program. It's a very impressive program, but we'll see if they can eventually win the big game because they haven't been able to recently.
Yeah, it's a program that, like I said, has a lot of pressure on itself. There are a bunch of stats, kind of rolling around about just their overall run against, top 25 teams, against, different spreads of that nature, and just overall, a program that hasn't been able to break through. And I would say this is kind of similar to Ryan Day at Ohio State, of what everybody was talking about before this season in terms of, all right, they invested in the roster. They invested in this. They invested in that. Time for Ryan Day to go beat Michigan. Time for Ryan Day to go win a national championship. They do have that opportunity to go win a national championship. But once again, they lost to Michigan. With Penn State, James Franklin, I wouldn't say they've gone out and invested in NIL like we've seen other programs do. I'm sure they have a very nice NIL program, not trying to get into a bickering match online with anyone over that. But the reality is that James Franklin has built a strong football team, just like he's done in the past. And they're built on hard work, discipline, toughness, all of those things that you'd expect, especially with the Penn State brand overall. But what you don't see is them getting it done in crunch time. And it's not even like they're getting blown out. They're just falling short. And maybe it is, to an extent, kind of an athlete thing. They don't have some of the first guys off the bus at some of these skill positions or other spots. They've got a few incredible players, but that might be the difference for him. And look, I would say this, and we'll talk about this, from a talent perspective, there are guys that are high-end players and that are high-end athletes on this team, but it's not the most talented team that SMU's faced from a pure talent perspective. It might be the best collective group of talent that is also well coached that SMU has faced this year. But I would say Clemson is a little bit more of a pure talented team than what SMU's facing this week against Penn State. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. Can James Franklin, take care of business against the Scott Simons? Can they out-scheme Rhett Lashley on the defensive side? We're going to talk about all that and more in this breakdown.
It kind of reminds me of the SMU regime of the past, where you could put it together in the regular season, and then basically when it got to crunch time, it got to late November, the team just unfortunately fell apart. And that's really what has happened to Penn State over the last 10 years of, yeah, they'll win 10 games. They'll win a game day game against Minnesota or someone like that. And then when it comes time to play for a play-in game for the Big Ten championship, or you make the Big Ten championship, and you just can't get it done. But let's move on to when SMU's on offense. And you got to talk about this Penn State defense. And defensive coordinator Tom Allen spent the previous 7 years as the head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers. 4-2-5 base scheme. And then as I get into the stats, they're really good statistically. 6th in total defense, 8th in scoring defense, and 6 of the top 8 scoring defenses are in this 12-team playoff field. 9th rush defense, 16th pass defense. Takeaways is something that they're not overly strong in. They only have 17 on the year, which is 59th in the country. And then sacks, they're 34th in the country. 2.5 sacks a game, 33 on the season. But in my opinion, I think it's an elite defense that can do it all. Great rush and pass defense. Get after the quarterback with great edge players. And if anything, yeah, they don't force an excessive amount of turnovers, but you don't need to when you give up less than 17 points per game. Their best players, AP first-team All-American, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, first-team All-Big Ten, outside linebacker, D-end, number 11, Abdul Carter. 6'3", 252, 11 sacks, 51 pressures, 19 and a half tackles for loss, also has 2 forced fumbles and 3 passes batted down. Look, when we played TJ Parker last game against Clemson, that was a big test. TJ Parker still got home and got a strip sack in the ACC championship. Abdul Carter has the same, if not more, ability to change the game in a very similar way. I think Abdul Carter is going to be a top 5 draft pick in the NFL next year. I think he's going to be the first defensive end off the board. And in a league that prioritizes quarterbacks and pass rushers, he is going to be a very highly valued target for a lot of NFL GMs. Our tackles must play with the best technique and execution that we've done all season in order to take him away from this game. We have to eliminate him and make him a non-factor if we're going to be able to win this game. We already played well against the other first-team All-American defensive end, of course, Boston College's Donovan Eziraku. But Donovan Eziraku was on the road. He was in our house. He did get a little bit out of his game when he was trying to hurt Kevin. Abdul Carter, I don't think, is going to make those same mistakes. You move on to linebacker, number 41, Kobe King, 6'1", 248. Second team All Big Ten, kind of a do-it-all linebacker. 3 sacks, 55 tackles. He's an above-average cover linebacker as well, which in our pass game is going to be crucial for Penn State. He has 226 coverage snaps. He's only given up 16 receptions. His body size at 248 tells me he's a run stopper, but he's pretty effective at whatever Penn State has him do. And then he has a few snaps over in the slot and then corner, but a majority of the time he's going to be in the box. And then a couple DBs, corner number 4, A.J. Harris, third team All Big Ten, 6'1", 193, 22 receptions on 38 targets, only 1 pick, but he did take it back for a touchdown. And then safety Jalen Reed, second team All Big Ten, 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns given up during the regular season, and then gave up 4 against Oregon 2 weeks ago. 26 targets, 23 receptions. If we get a good matchup, I do think SMU plays well against him. I think if Jordan Hudson or Keyshawn Smith or someone like that is able to get out and get open and we start feeding them the ball, I think we're going to have a very successful day offensively. But the formula to win this game on offense remains the same. KJ in this offense has to play from ahead. We have to silence the crowd, be able to lean on the run game versus trying to air it out in obvious passing situations. And if we can stay balanced, we'll have tons of success.
Yeah, you bring up first of all, Abdul Carter is going to be somebody that they have to scheme around or figure that out. And I don't know what that's going to look like. But what I do know is, like you said, Donovan Eziraku, TJ Parker, guys like that. This is where you have an SMU team that is experienced facing certain body types, certain athletes. And again, I think Abdul Carter is the best out of them. But he is, he is better than TJ Parker. Like I'm just trying to say the jump maybe in a game one-on-one with him is not as different. Maybe he'll prove us wrong or whatever, but it's not this, oh my God, this is our first ever game against a Power 4 opponent on the road. Like, I don't know if there's going to be that shock factor athletically. I just think the reality is that Savion Byrd or PJ Williams are going to have to play their best game of the season. That's what it comes down to. And if they do, they're talented enough to very much hold their own, and athletically especially. That's why you have guys like that. And then if you can maybe, play Andrew Chamblee a little bit, maybe keep them fresh, that'll help going into the second half of this game. Because, one thing, and I know this is maybe a little tangenty, but when it's cold, guys don't necessarily think about hydrating as much. You're like, oh, it's kind of nice outside. It's chilly. It's cold. I'm freezing, but I don't have to drink as much water. No, you need to double down on that. And I know SMU has a great strength and conditioning staff, but we saw Ja'Kai Clark go down against Charlotte or against Clemson in Charlotte late in that game. So that was a cramp. He was back in there in the next play, but just something for the guys to maybe think about if we've got any listeners on the pod down the stretch of this week getting ready for it, is maybe have another gallon on Friday night. But with Abdul Carter, I think he's one of the top players overall for SMU to face all year at any position. And so kudos to him for a hell of a career. He's going to be a top draft pick, and SMU is going to have to find ways to make it happen and defend him. So with that, though, I agree with you. The formula is the same for SMU like it's been all year. Avoiding those poor starts with turnovers. I think getting points on this opening drive is critical for SMU if they do, in particular, get the ball first. That is a tone-setting opportunity like it was against Louisville. Like, that was a very hostile crowd. It's nothing like Penn State, but that was SMU's first taste this season of a hostile crowd. They handled it very well from the start, and then it was a back-and-forth game, which I am expecting against Penn State. This is not a team that's going to roll over, but Penn State is at their best when they can jump out on teams, and that is something that SMU is going to have to avoid with good offense. I think the defense matches up well, which we'll talk about. But if I'm SMU, this is a game where you can have Matthew Hibner be that X factor And I know Brashard Smith has speed, and I know Roderick Daniels has speed, and you can maybe get them having to defend the full length or the full width of the field with those guys in particular. But Matthew Hibner is going into this game not being talked about at all. This is a legacy game opportunity for Matthew Hibner, and against a Penn State defense that, 6'1", 250. I don't know if SMU's faced a middle linebacker like that this year. I would have to go back and look at the rosters and the depth charts, but you don't see that is a true Big Ten linebacker.
Solid.
He's what would it be? Vintage Big Ten linebacker. I haven't seen a picture of Kobe. He might have a neck roll. I don't know. But for SMU, I think getting Matthew Hibner involved as that X factor is very important. I think it's going to help Kevin be comfortable, and who just announced that he's locked in, staying, which is huge for the Mustangs. And again, I kind of go back to the BYU game and how it energized SMU. And I wonder if that is going to be a little bit of a factor going into this game offensively, because SMU is going to get slept on. A lot of people are going to talk about Drew Allard. They're going to talk about Tyler Warren. They're going to talk about those guys on the Penn State, the big bad Penn State Nittany Lions. And SMU's offense has a chance to make a statement. When they've been in those positions this year, they've usually come out on the right end of things, I would say, outside of the ACC championship.
We talked about Louisville week, how great Ashton Gelati was after having a first-team All-ACC season the previous year, and he was a non-factor in that ball game. And SMU took the ball, drove right down the field, and capped it off with a rushing touchdown. And you could just feel the energy of the stadium in Louisville just get sucked right out. That is going to be crucial in this ball game. If SMU jumps out to a even 3-0, if you take the ball, go down the field, kick a field goal, that is going to make the game so much easier than go 3 and out. Penn State gets the ball, drives the field, scores a touchdown, because now you're playing from behind. And look, Kevin played a really good game in the conference championship besides the first quarter. He was airing it out. He had one of his most efficient games through the air in the second, third, and fourth quarter. But I'd rather stick to the Louisville script or the Pitt script of, hey, we're going to keep handing the ball off until you guys stop us. And then when you do, guess what? Then we can get balanced. But as we move over to the defensive side, I do want to talk about how Penn State has a little bit been handicapped. And their offensive coordinator is Andy Kotelnicki. Their total offense 15th, scoring is 25th, rushing is 19th, but they ran for 297 on Oregon, number 1 team in the country a couple weeks ago. 41st in passing, 24th in giveaways with 12 on the season, and then 10th in the country in sacks allowed, only 12 in 13 games, which is going to be a big challenge for our defensive line. But I want to talk about the quarterbacks, and I mean multiple for Penn State. Starting quarterback Drew Allard, honorable mention All Big Ten, a guy that is going to come back next year for Penn State and believes the job's not finished regardless of what happens in the playoff. Through the air, he's really efficient, almost a 70% completion percentage, 2894 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 8.9 yards per attempt. And then on the ground, he's effective as well. 72 carries, 7 touchdowns, 279 yards. But backup quarterback Bo Pribula, I think, is a X factor for Penn State's offense if it's not Tyler Warren. They are going to lose a big part of their offense by him hitting the transfer portal and not playing in this game. He's played in all 13 games so far this year. 26 of 35, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, but he really gets it done on the ground. He's second on the team in rushing touchdowns, and he's 4th in carries and rushing yards. It's a guy that Penn State has been able to lean on and really run this offense through until he entered the transfer portal, and he's not going to play. And so that plays into SMU's strength by really limiting them to just Drew Allard, who is a good player in his own right. I'm not taking that away from him. But the best player on their offense is the tight end. Number 44, Tyler Warren, second team AP All-American, but he won the Mackey Award, best tight end in college football. First team All Big Ten, and Penn State does everything that they can to have him involved in as many plays as possible. He's their leading receiver, over 1,000 yards, 88 receptions, 8 touchdowns. He's also ran the ball, 23 rushes, 191 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then he has 5 pass attempts as well. So they're really just trying to do whatever they can to get the ball in Tyler Warren's hands so they can run this offense through him. And then the running backs I want to talk about as well, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. They each have over 800 yards on the season for a combined 15 touchdowns. And that's thanks to this offensive line. This is the biggest offensive line in the Big Ten. 318 pounds is the average size across their starters. We have not seen that other than maybe Florida State this year. Olaiavavege Ione, second team All Big Ten guard Sal Wormley, and tackle Drew Shelton are honorable mention guys as well. And so I think the X factor on defense is going to be, can our defensive line push around the biggest and baddest unit that we've faced in the Rhett Lashley era? And we have to weather the storm early. And if we do that, and if we can get home early, then we'll have success and we'll see the defensive line that we've seen all season long.
Yeah, I think with this offensive line, the big question for me is going to be, can you get pressure? Can you get after them? Because from what I've seen, they're get the ball out quick. They do a lot of window dressing. I mean, this is a game that Scott Simons is going to have a bunch of checks for his defensive guys. And that's where the bye week could really help SMU's defense. They will play a lot of things, I would say, straight up, at least. And then they have some elaborate blitz packages that they've been able to deploy. And we broke down some of those throughout the year on the, film breakdowns that you've done, Hayden. In particular, you think about some of those sacks in the Virginia game. And SMU is probably going to have to bring some of that pressure to maybe throw them off their game a little bit. But if you can't get that pressure, because they do get the ball out quickly and they do use all sorts of different ways to get their best players involved, okay, can you match up man for man, beat your guy at the point of the attack, do your job? That is one of the mantras of Scott Simons' defense. If everybody does that, they're usually pretty stout. That's where they are at their best. You look at the Boston College game, and they didn't have Elijah Roberts in that game, so that's a key point there. But that's probably the best comparison offensive line wise for what SMU is going to face on Saturday at Penn State. And I don't necessarily know if that, you look back on that and if that gives them confidence of how they're going to be able to play this game up front, but they're not going to be shocked by the size of this Penn State group. What Penn State's going to try to do, in my opinion, is they're going to try to mash SMU a little bit. And then they get Tyler Warren involved and get their guys in space quickly and try to work their way down the field. And for the most part this year, that's what SMU, and this is why field position is going to be so critical on Saturday. That's where SMU has been able to bend, but not necessarily break in these situations. This wide receiver group for Penn State isn't a group that will blow your socks off. I mean, and they have some good players. They're deep. I think they have like probably 5 guys that they've played, from what I was talking to some of the Penn State guys, that they played a good amount this year. Whereas SMU's faced, Bryant Wesco last game. They faced Malachi Fields. They faced Ja'Cory Brooks. They faced Jack Besh. They faced a bunch of guys that are among the top athletes and or top producing wide receivers in the country this year. And I don't know what SMU takes away or tries to take away here from Penn State, but I'll say this: if they let Tyler Warren be the only guy, I don't want to say that's a good thing by any means, but if they can kind of make him the only guy that does anything on this Penn State offense, I think that kind of bodes well into their game plan in a sense. Like, I think they allowed a little bit with Jake Briningstool from Clemson, and then eventually they settled in and played really good football in the second half for the most part. I just am so intrigued by what Scott Simons is going to break out against this Penn State offense and how it's going to go, because with the depth of this defensive line, I don't necessarily worry about them being mashed.
Here's what I like. Scott Simons was snubbed from the Broyles Award finalist list. If you know Scott Simons, you know it is very easy to irritate him. And all the defensive guys claim the worse week that Coach Simons has, the better they play on Saturday. So I hate that he got snubbed. I was planning on going to the Broyles Award dinner in Hot Springs, Arkansas, if he was going to be a finalist. And I'm sure he took some disrespect from that. We're the 4th best rushing defense in the country. So he's done an incredible job for this organization. I'm so glad that we extended him. I believe it was last week to a multi-year deal. But I think he's going to be a little pissed off this game. And I think he's going to have something to prove on national television in front of the whole country that this defense is legit. So I do want to get to our keys to victory. And Billy, you talked about Tyler Warren and how if he's the only one doing anything, I think that's okay for the game plan. Well, I could agree. Yeah, if Tyler Warren has 200 yards and everybody else has 50, maybe we'll be all right. But what I have as my ultimately second key to the game is just eliminate Tyler Warren. I don't want him to find the end zone. I think if he doesn't find the end zone or has greater than 100 yards, because I think he'll probably get one or the other, just realistically how they run their offense, I think it'll be fine. But the first key is going to be win the first quarter. We cannot have the train wreck that happened in Charlotte. If we jump out quickly and we eliminate some of the excitement, energy from the crowd, you kind of calm those butterflies in your stomach, get some confidence of, hey, as we proved in the second half against Clemson, we can play with anybody. So you get some of that confidence going and you just start playing free. You don't have to press as much, where if you're coming back, you're gripping the stick tight and you're nervous and you're like, is this it? Is our season ending? It's just, this team is so much better when they play from ahead, from a stay balanced standpoint, from a confidence standpoint, from a defensive line gets to pin their ears back and go standpoint. So win the first quarter takes a lot of that pressure off. And then I think we need to have greater than 1.5 sacks by this defensive line. And I think we need to allow less than 2 sacks from our offensive line. I don't think we can let Abdul Carter just absolutely wreck this game, because he will. If he gets home, he's a strong enough player, and he's been watching the TJ Parker tape to see what he did in the first half. So let's limit what they're going to do and stay ahead of the chains. If we have less than 4 tackles for loss allowed, we're going to be able to do that effectively. And so I think we play with enough focus and technique, and obviously Garen Justice, I'm a big believer in, and he's going to get those guys right. And I talked to him, and he was irritated with how the first half went, but he was also inspired by how this group responded in the second half. So I think we're going to have a lot of success as long as we stay ahead of the chains. Defensive line, I just think they got to get them off their rhythm. I don't think they can allow them to stay all the things that we want to do. That's what our defensive line has to prevent them from doing. Can't let them stay balanced. Can't let them run all over us and then dump it to Tyler Warren for a big gain, because like playing Navy, if a team is just handing the ball off over and over and over again, eventually your safeties are going to cheat, and that's when you're going to get dumped over the top for a big one. So you just have to keep everything in front of you and allow us to just feast at the end of the day. This defensive line unit, as we've proven so far against a Boston College and against a Clemson front, can play with anybody when they're at their best. And so we keep everything in front. We do a good enough job on defense. I think we'll have enough to get it done, but it's going to be a 60-minute war no matter what, just like it was against Clemson and just like it'll be from here on out this season.
Yeah, I think one of my big keys is hitting the 35 carry mark on offense. Being able to run the ball, whether it be Brashard Smith having again kind of a legacy type game. He needs to be involved and get hot early, and that's going to be really important, because again, I think that helps settle Kevin down a little bit. And this is a game where I think after the Clemson game, a concern or a question of Kevin Jennings would be, okay, can you come out and play your usual self from the get-go? He needs to get back to that. I think you and I have talked about this, but you look at Virginia, and I could be wrong on Cal, but I don't know if SMU scored on its opening drives the last 3 games. Yeah, so that is something that they need to get back to, and you've got to find ways to do that. And I think maybe one of those games there was a missed field goal. Maybe it was Cal to open things up. But when you have that type of a start, it's very important. And to do that, I think you've got to get Brashard Smith going quickly. And then from there, you need contributions from an LJ Johnson. You need contributions from maybe a Derek McFall. I don't know if they go to him in this game. They did not go to him against Clemson. But I do think one of the key points for SMU in terms of maybe finding room against Penn State is using your speed. I know they have athletes. They are a well-recruited team, but the way they line up and the way they play, you saw against Oregon what an up-tempo, speedy attack can do. And Oregon has some elite talent at wide receiver, and SMU has some solid talent against wide receiver, or with wide receivers that has speed to make that happen. But where SMU could really get them, maybe, playing the width of that field, which opened things up in the run game up the middle, is having to respect a Roderick Daniels on an end around or a jet sweep. And I hate it into the boundary, so hopefully it's to the field. But you have some of those opportunities for SMU, I think, to do some of those things against this defense. Can the offensive line create a little bit of a wall to allow that to happen east-west, to then hit the big hole and get north-south and pick up, good chunks of yardage in the run game or the extension of the run game, however Rhett Lashley draws that up. So the big key for me is sticking with the run game, starting it early, not trying to find it later in the game. If you're, trying to, do something different and come out with a little bit more of a, I don't want to say aggressive, because I think SMU needs to be aggressive, but I think SMU simplifying things again is maybe the key to finding their success and their early balance offensively. And if the offense gets going in the right direction early, I think the defense feeds off that and they will play their game. And I know this is, when we talk about this game, there's a lot of ifs on both sides of the ball. And Penn State doesn't really turn it over too much. They don't, commit unnecessary penalties. They play pretty sound football overall, similar to Clemson. Like, they're not going to give you many, if at all, extra possessions. So finding a way to build confidence in your team so you can take advantage of your position of playing without pressure, playing free, playing and having fun, treating the cold like it should be a reward, and treating this road game in the college football playoff like it's your right to be there, go take it. And it is a little bit of a mindset in this game that has to be backed up with on-field success early on, so that SMU can then capitalize on some of the matchups that they do, I think, have over Penn State in a sense.
Look, I know you guys, when we say you got to run the ball, I'm sure you're like, all right, offensive lineman, we get it. But look, this is going to be a game where it's going to be in the 20s for a majority of the game. The ball in cold weather, and I was a center, so I know this, the leather physically gets harder. It turns into a rock, for lack of a better word. And so we saw that against Clemson, where we had the drops. And I think the cold had something to do with it, where maybe we're not as prepared for the cold weather, because in Dallas today, it was 75 degrees. And so it's going to be a little bit of a shot getting off the bus, but hopefully we had the experience against Clemson to where, all right, we got it under our belt. Now we have a new way of preparing. Maybe it's preparing the ball. Maybe it's just sticking the damn balls in the freezer before practice. I don't know. I mean, I've heard of crazier, but ultimately this team is being rewarded for their hard work this season. You get to play in front of millions, literally. SMU is going to be on the national stage against a national brand in Penn State. And it's going to be unreal, and I can't wait to watch it. But I don't want this ride to end just yet. I think this team has enough. I think this team has the confidence and the ability to get this done if they play to the best of their ability. I don't think this is a game to where we're going to look at the keys of the game next week and be like, well, we only did 3 of these and we still won. It's going to be we're going to have to play one of our best games that we've played all season long. So I want to get to my prediction and just about how this has been a magical season. And if you had told me way back after the Nevada game that, hey, we're going to play Penn State in the playoff, probably wouldn't believe you. But ultimately, I probably would have been satisfied with that, even though I'm not ready for this to be over. This is going to be an extremely, extremely difficult challenge, as people think Penn State is the easiest route to the national championship. But if SMU wins this game, there's no reseeding in the playoff. SMU now has the easiest path to the national championship. As far as this game goes on Saturday, I think David is going to have to load up his slingshot to take down Goliath, ultimately. I think Penn State is loaded from a talent perspective, from a home field advantage perspective, and from a coaching perspective. I think that they're very similar. Rhett is obviously an up-and-coming coach, but this is the first massive game, besides maybe the ACC championship, that this program has been involved in recently. So if SMU not just wins, but dominates the line of scrimmage, takes care of the football, and starts fast, I think SMU will do enough to win this football game. But if we mess around the way the last 3 games have gone, it's going to be a disappointing end to an otherwise incredible first season in the ACC. I like SMU coming off the bye week. We've been flat out dominant this season coming off the bye. And I think Rhett keeps this train rolling one more week. And then on top of that, I was doing some reading. CBS came out today and said that this game is the most likely upset in the college football playoff. I agree. I got SMU 31, Penn State 27.
Look, whenever we talk about predictions and we try to lay them out, I like to come from the standpoint of I think both teams are going to play well for the most part. And against Clemson, we saw what happened when SMU did not. We saw that they, messed around, like you said in the beginning, and it ultimately caught up to them. But this team has found different ways to win. And so for the first time, I'm going under 30 with my point total for SMU, which, look, hasn't been the easiest path then for SMU to win ball games. That is not something that they've really excelled at. And I say that not to say that SMU can't get over 30. It wouldn't shock me if they did. 60 minutes is a long game, especially if SMU starts fast. That could key them to enough points to topple Penn State. Against top 25 teams this year, Penn State has not scored more than 21 points until the Big Ten championship game. And they were able to do it against an Oregon defense, and they found their rhythm. If Penn State's offense is going to look like that, we're going to be in for an interesting time. Now, that was in a dome. That was, on a neutral site. This is at home. All the pressure is on Penn State. And I don't know if against SMU's defense, they're going to be able to get what they got against Oregon. And I think Oregon's a very, very good football team, but I just don't see Penn State hitting 35 points. I just don't see it. And that's going to, be on SMU's defense to step up, stay, and play sound, fundamental assignment football, which I think with 2 weeks to prepare, a little bit of time to maybe get a little bit more fresh, that can be to SMU's advantage. And like you said about the bye week, it's so important for SMU. I think they had a good opportunity to reset, get right, knowing that they have this opportunity. And I just am going to pick SMU. I mean, you and I talk about this. At this point, we're not picking against SMU. But I got SMU winning 27-23. I think we'll see some decisions by both coaches go in the realm of, okay, all right, let me take points here. Let me be a little smart, getting those field goal opportunities. And look, both defenses are kind of bend but don't break styles in a way. Like, I mean, that's really kind of been one of SMU in particular's MOs. And, if that's the case, I could see both teams kind of getting into field goal range and kicking those. So I got SMU 27-23. It wouldn't surprise me if that score happened, if Brashard Smith hit 150 all-purpose yards. I think a huge piece for SMU's offense is, will Brashard be able to be a factor in the passing game? I mean, if he's lined up against Kobe King, as good as Kobe King is, I don't know if that's a good matchup for Penn State. So how will they defend Brashard Smith from the passing game perspective? Will they assign a safety? Will they assign a nickel? What do you do there when SMU is in, a look with, Jordan Hudson, Romello Brinson, or Moochie Dixon as the wide receivers on the outside? And then you have a Roderick Daniels, you got a Matthew Hibner, and you got Brashard Smith. Those are interesting matchup decisions for Penn State and how they defend them. And Tom Allen is one hell of a defensive coordinator. I know that much, having watched a lot of his defenses through the years. But I still think SMU can get it done. I think they're going to be able to play free. I don't know Penn State is going to kind of have to prove the country wrong in a big way. Everybody is talking about how SMU's in. They were the decision over Alabama. They do deserve it after how they played against Clemson, getting that score close and all those things. They showed they belonged. Penn State, though, lost the Big Ten championship game against an undefeated Oregon team, and they haven't been able to come away with that big win this season. And so I don't know. It's a gut. This team has shown a few different ways in terms of how they can win games this year. And I think we find out the latest one, SMU 27, Penn State 23.
I like when our best players are rewarded for their hard work. You had Brashard Smith, third-team utility All-American, and Colin Rogers, first-team kicker All-American. So I believe special teams could play the difference in this game. If it's a defensive slugfest and we take one to the house, I think that's wraps, to be honest. And Brashard is due. He was obviously a great kick returner for us, and we haven't had a kick return touchdown yet this year. And I'm hoping it comes to fruition on Saturday. That would be unreal. I think Barley House, which is probably where I'm going to watch the game, is going to be absolutely bouncing if that happens. But we'll see. I also think we're getting set up for multiple younger guys to be All-Americans next year. I really like Matthew Hipner. I think RJ Maryland and Matthew Hipner, if they're both coming back, are going to be a deadly tight end combo. It could be the best in the country.
Yeah.
And Kevin Jennings is already getting a little bit of 2025 Heisman train starting to roll. And Kevin, after the BYU game where they took that loss, came out slinging against TCU. I like him with 2 weeks of preparation. I like what Rhett has done to get his guys ready and prepared for big-time contests like this, because that's ultimately what this is. Biggest game of Rhett's career, biggest game of SMU history, and I got a lot of confidence in the guy that I'm grateful is our head coach. He's taken us this far already. We'll see if he can't take us even farther.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. 11 a.m. Central on TNT from Penn State. I'll be there in attendance. Dean will as well. So we'll be live on the ground there, and we'll be covering it. And look, I said this before the ACC championship, and I know it was a little hard to enjoy because of how the start happened for SMU, but try to enjoy this one, everyone. I mean, this is just what you play for. You get an opportunity to play for a national championship, take a step in that path, 16 quarters. I mean, it's kind of wild. That's what SMU's, path is to a national championship. And it sounds like a lot, but I mean, it'll go quick. And so enjoy this one. If you're going, bundle up. It's going to be cold for sure, but SMU is hoping for a fast start and a hot start on Saturday in State College. So it's going to be, I think we're in for one of the better games of the first round of the college football playoffs. So should we break down that group of games?
Sure. So we'll go quickly with this. We won't do a 48-minute breakdown of Indiana Notre Dame, but Notre Dame has improved as the season goes on. I think in South Bend, while it's not going to affect Indiana as far as weather goes, I think it's going to be hard to play. And Indiana's only game against a top team went horrendously. I mean, they got blown out by Ohio State. So ultimately, I got Notre Dame in a big win. I got Notre Dame 38, Indiana 17.
Yeah, I think Indiana is going to find out a little bit, about just playing another upper echelon team and how that could look. I agree with you. At Notre Dame, I don't know the weather up there, quite honestly, but I would imagine it's going to be cold. I guess we can look right now. But I think Notre Dame, for as much as I think they are, it's going to be 29, high of 29 in that one, or their game's on Friday, but
it's high Friday.
Yeah.
40% chance.
So both teams will be comfortable in that, being from up north, but I still think Notre Dame is going to get that done. I would say 31-10. I think it's a wide margin. I think Notre Dame controls it from the start and gets things rolling. But if they don't, man, I mean, I know I'm down on Indiana's overall standing with the season they've had, not necessarily beating anyone of note. But if Notre Dame loses that game, man, Marcus Freeman is going to get to know some of the pressure that James Franklin, Ryan Day, and guys like that are under in this college football playoff for his future, because it's a Notre Dame team that, again, like you said, improved a lot over the course of the season, but they are expecting to make a little bit of a run and at least win this first round playoff game. It's interesting. And this is obviously the first year of this, but we've seen a little bit of the, home field court, whatever advantage, maybe dip a little bit in recent years for different games, whether it be teams being like, okay, all right, let's go ruin their day or night or whatever, and the pressure not being on them. But I don't know. I don't know how much home field advantage. I think we're going to obviously find out a lot, but these first round games are going to be really interesting. Like there are games that you look at, and we'll talk about the other two, but it wouldn't shock me if 3 of the 4 were underdogs winning.
Personally, I loved playing in the road. I loved going to somebody else's house. I was the guy in the back of the bus taunting the fans on the way in. Sorry, Mom. But I loved going and crashing the party in somebody else's stadium. There's no pressure, because especially when you play at a TCU, where let's face it, in 2019, nobody picked us to. I think game day was a legit sweep, because I think I have that picture still somewhere in my phone. But yeah, there was no pressure. And so you just come out swinging, and we jumped up early. We had Shane Buechele ran in like an 8-yard rushing touchdown, and it became oh my God, we can beat these guys. And so I think that's going to be one of the cases. But people have talked about how Notre Dame does not have the resources to win a national championship. If that's true, there is maybe a 5-team list in college football that has the resources to win a national championship, and all of them are in the SEC. So I don't know if I believe that for a second. The seat is going to be a little warm if Notre Dame does end up losing this game. But we move down to warmer weather. We go to Austin, Clemson traveling to play the University of Texas. And maybe it's because SMU just fell to Clemson. But Dabo's experienced, been to the playoff a bunch. Clemson as an underdog. It's hard to say, but it's hard to bet against. And then Texas hasn't won a playoff game yet, or even really just a massive game. I mean, both games against Georgia, they ended up losing. And then that Texas A&M game, which I'm a Texas A&M hater. Y'all know that. Texas A&M did not impress me. The quarterback play of Texas A&M was awful, to where Texas was basically gifted that game. And so I like Clemson 24, Texas 14. I don't think Quinn Ewers has blown me away. He's the lowest graded quarterback in the playoff out of all 12 teams. So I like Cade Klubnik and Clemson going to Austin, getting an upset.
By the way, Cade Klubnik, the homecoming, did you see his face when they drew that announcement? I mean, that is going to be quite an opportunity for him to forever become a legend at Clemson. I mean, truthfully, regardless of what happens after that, if they can get this win, that would, just cement him as one of the better ones to come through there in recent time. But, I am torn on this one. I'm so torn because Texas's defense has been really good. And I mean, they've made a lot of teams look super average offensively, basically save for Georgia. And I don't know what's in the water for the Bulldogs before that game, but they maybe should have tried that a few other times this season before they, ultimately kind of snuck their way back into the SEC championship game in a way. But, I don't know which way I'm going to go. But I go Texas 17, Clemson 14. I think it's a low scoring game. I don't know why. Maybe that's, I don't know. That's a gut. I'm probably going to be wrong on that one. If there's anyone out of the picks for that game, that's me. That's probably the most wrong.
Yeah. My only argument is Texas's defense is elite. We thought our defense was elite, and Clemson put up 34 points. And so I think, even though we talked about last week, Clemson, they haven't put up. Yeah, right. All that. But finally, you got Tennessee at Ohio State in the shoe. A lot of people are counting Tennessee out. I think Tennessee personally looks dangerous. I know it's been against probably lesser competition that they put up their best numbers, but Ohio State losing to Michigan definitely has me concerned over, can Ryan Day right the ship, get his team right? 3 weeks in between games. that's hard. And I know both teams have to do it, but Ohio State is sitting on a bad upset loss, while I believe Tennessee went out and got a win in the last week of the regular season. But other than Penn State, I like Tennessee. I think they're overall a dangerous, fun team. I like Josh Heupel. And so I got Tennessee stealing a win in the shoe. The question is, do they get a felony if they plant the flag? And so I got Tennessee 35, Ohio State 31.
Yeah, I think this is the one that I probably feel best about Tennessee beating, or the underdog beating its opponent. I just think that Tennessee has shown that they can win a multitude of ways. They've had games where they've not played well and come out on top. They've had some of these grind games. There's a lot of talk about, what happened to their offense. That was kind of supposed to be the big storyline with Tennessee this year, where their, offense led by Nico Iamaleava was going to be able to produce. They go out, their final game, they hit Vanderbilt 36-23. They, didn't really put up a ton against Georgia 2 weeks before that, 31-17. It wasn't really competitive. But there's something about Ohio State right now that just doesn't seem necessarily right. I don't know. Maybe it is that Michigan game, like you said. Maybe it's a complete mental hurdle for the Michigan game. Maybe it is. But the way Tennessee's defense has been able to play in a good number of games this year, you look at that win over Alabama. You look at what they were able to do, throughout their season at certain points. I don't know. They have found, again, different ways to win. I'm going to go with Tennessee. I'm going to take them 28-24 over Ohio State.
I like it. So we're on the same page, except for Clemson, Texas.
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. Cool. So, look.
Well, hopefully, Billy, we get to do this again here after this week. Hopefully we get at least one more SMU game as they take on Penn State Nittany Lions. It's going to be fun. I love college football. This has been an unreal college football season.
Yeah, it's been a blast, and what a fun ride for SMU fans. So we're hoping to be breaking down SMU Boise State here in, I guess, whenever we start that breakdown. But if SMU wins, they will take on Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Eve. Huge matchup. Hopefully, we'll be seeing a lot of people there for that one, because that is, Phoenix, New Year's Eve, sounds like a pretty good time. So we'll see how SMU handles Penn State. What a historic matchup. And also, one other thing we didn't mention, this game is for redemption over 1982, where Penn State was awarded the national championship back then over SMU. So there's a lot of people that remember that, and maybe it's something that is talked about. I don't know how much it obviously impacts the actual players and things like that, but maybe there is a history lesson. Rhett Lashley said it. He is a history buff, and he likes to look back on things and look at, why certain things happened, how they could have been avoided, or how they can be built on. And that 1982 game, maybe it comes up in a team meeting this week. I'm not sure, but
hey, Penn State had a loss. SMU only had a tie. They still gave the national championship to Penn State. Sounds rigged to me, but
it sounds like it's a good opportunity for SMU to go out and play for all the guys that have done it before them.
No doubt.
And to maybe do something very, very special. So this is going to be a fun one to follow. Hayden breaking it down as always with us on the Pony Express podcast. We appreciate you guys for listening, and we will have much more coverage at On the Pony Express this week. Again, transfer portal coverage as well rolling right now. So we will have that for you guys. But for Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. Show us a special guest, Hayden.
Yeah, he wasn't on versus Clemson. It was his fault that we didn't get it done. So,
yeah, there we go. All right, righting one wrong right there. Yep. We'll see if SMU can bounce back as well, and we'll be following it at ontheponyexpress.com. So thanks for listening to this edition, everyone, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody.
Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU.
And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.